To say that socialism doesn't work is to overlook the fact that it did work, and it worked for hundreds of millions of people.
I've got some literature in my car that will change your whole way of thinking.
Thank you, Bama.
Welcome to Leaping Larry's Revolutionary Reading Theatre.
Yeah. See ya.
Thank you so much for that resub, Bama. Very much appreciate that, comrade. Okay, so today we are reading from Foundations of Leninism. Stalin. We are right now on this chapter right here. Chapter 5, The Peasant Question. I can just hear
books
Bob
have stuff
meowing.
recorded down all over the years from people. And if we could find a book with someone that had
get a
similar
comic
problems,
quote for it.
just
Okay,
take what they
cool.
wrote down in the book and make it. Fuck. Sorry.
I'm down
Take
with
what
this.
they wrote down and make it ours.
Okay, and now this chapter as well, while the peasant question regarding a peasantry in particular might not be so relevant here in the West, the conclusions and what this means in content does still matter, because of course there's still the existence of small producers that, while there might not be a peasantry. Who's got those channel points to burn? I hear Bob. Bob really wants to vote. I'll close the door to this room in a few minutes. Let Bob out for a second. Bob's dying. Get out. Yeah. Well, the thing is, we gotta do a proper introduction for Bob, you know? Here's one that some handsome Georgian philosopher said one time, too, that I find interesting. Perhaps you'll find it interesting as well. The doctrine, advocated by Kropotkin, which confines future socialism within the limits of separate towns and cities, is contrary to the powerful expansion of production. It is harmful to the proletariat. I like this one as well. You too. From the same handsome Georgian philosopher. The revolution would not have been victorious in Russia, and Kolchak and Denikin would not have been crushed, had not the Russian proletariat enjoyed the sympathy and support of the oppressed peoples of the former Russian Empire. But to win the sympathy and support of these people, first had to break the fetters of Russian imperialism and free these people from the yoke of national oppression. Now, does this seem similar to be just like denying the existence of national oppression or colonialism in general? No. You have to address those questions. Darlin. Oh, darling. Okay, you also get also get a plug to look at.
He's a communist.
Oh, really?
Yep, big communist. Big communist.
Oh.
So here we go. Chapter 5, The Peasant Question. From this theme, I take 4 questions. A. The presentation of the question. B. Peasantry during the bourgeois democratic revolution. C. The peasantry during the proletarian revolution. And D. The peasantry after the consolidation of power. Look, kitty. Yeah, Frankster. I'm with you. Number 1, the presentation of the question. Some think that the fundamental thing in Leninism is the peasant question. The point of departure of Leninism is the question of the peasantry, of its role, its relative importance. This is absolutely wrong. The fundamental question of Leninism, point of departure, not the peasant question, but the question of the dictatorship of the proletariat, of the conditions under which it can be achieved, of the condition under which it can be consolidated. The peasant question, as the question of the ally of the proletariat, is its struggle for power, is a derivative question. This circumstance, however, does not in the least deprive the peasant question of the serious and vital importance it unquestionably has for the proletarian revolution. It is known that the serious study of the peasant question in the ranks of Russian Marxists began precisely on the First Revolution, 1905. The question of overthrowing Tsarism and of realizing the hegemony of the proletariat confronted the party in all its magnitude. When the question of the ally of the proletariat in the impending bourgeois revolution came of vital importance. It is also known that the peasant question in Russia assumed a still more urgent character during the proletarian revolution. The question of the dictatorship of the proletariat, of achieving and maintaining it, led to the question of allies for the proletariat, pending proletarian revolution. And this was natural. For those who were marching towards and preparing to assume power cannot but be interested in the question of who are their real allies. In this sense, the present question is part of the general question of the dictatorship of the proletariat, and as such, it is one of the most vital problems of Leninism. The attitude of indifference, sometimes even outright aversion, played by the parties of the Second International towards the peasant question, be explained not only by the specific conditions of development in the West. It is to be explained primarily by the fact that these parties do not believe in the proletarian dictatorship, that they fear revolution, have no intention of leading the proletariat to power. And those who are afraid of revolution, do not intend to lead the proletarians to power, cannot be interested in the question of allies for the proletariat, in the revolution. Them, the question of allies is one of indifference, of no immediate significance. The ironical attitude of heroes of the Second International towards the peasant question, regarded by them as a sign of good breeding, a sign of true Marxism. As a matter of fact, there is not a grain of Marxism in this. For indifference towards so important a question as the peasant question, the eve of proletarian revolution, is the reverse side of the repudiation of the dictatorship of the proletariat. It is an unmistakable sign of downright betrayal of Marxism. And I would say the mirror here of the mirror that you see reflected of this here is people that refuse to address the question of settler colonialism here. Those Marxists who just have an indifference towards the question of settler colonialism and ongoing First Nations genocide are doing this exact same thing that Stalin is talking about here, towards the anti-peasantry Second International opportunists. It's the same form of opportunism. It just, of course, has to assume different characteristics because it is aimed, while it's aimed at, like, functionally the same thing, maintaining the status quo, it's aimed at a different form of it, which is, of course, the native resistance settler colonial genocide. So again, for them, like, for those people who make that mistake, who refuse to answer the question of settler colonialism or the question of settlers and so on, what they're doing is showing that they're not interested in actually achieving a dictatorship of the proletariat. They're just interested in preserving the settler colonial system. If we ignore it, it will resolve by itself. Yes, yes, as we know, that's how it always happens. Like, are we anarchists or are we libertarian Stalinists or are we communists? Let's ask ourselves that. The white savior syndrome. The question is as follows: are the revolutionary potentialities latent in the peasantry by virtue of certain conditions of its existence already exhausted, or not? And if not, is there any hope, any basis, utilizing these potentialities for the proletarian revolution, for transforming the peasantry, the exploited majority of it, from the reserve of the bourgeoisie, which it was during the bourgeois revolution in the West, and still is, even now, a reserve of the proletariat, into its ally? Bad. Leninism replies to the question in the affirmative, i.e., it recognizes the existence of revolutionary capacities in the ranks of the majority of the peasantry, and the possibility of using the interests of the proletarian dictatorship. History of the three revolutions in Russia fully corroborates the conclusion of Leninism on this score. Just reading this makes me laugh so hard at how Noah tries to say about the three revolutions in the US. Like, just literally trying to copy this work and apply it to the US in, like, the most... I'm sorry, it's just striking me as I'm reading this. And it's hilarious to me. I do recommend everybody, and perhaps we will read it here sometime real soon. At some point, you should consume Counter-Revolution of 1776 by Gerald Horne. Hence the practical conclusion that the toiling masses of the peasantry must be supported in their struggle against bondage and exploitation, in their struggle for deliverance from oppression and poverty. Yeah, you have to consume that work, Cinnamon. Not just read it, you gotta consume it. Let it become you. This does not mean, of course, the proletariat must support every peasant movement. What we have in mind here is support for a movement or struggle of the peasantry which, directly or indirectly, facilitates the emancipation movement of the proletariat. Now, such as how supporting the First Nations struggle for liberation facilitates the emancipation movement of the proletariat here? Or anything like that, maybe? Yeah, I think there is GMO. So facilitates the emancipation movement of the proletariat, which in one way or another brings grist into the mill of the proletarian revolution, which helps to transform the peasantry into a reserve and ally of the working class. Like, again, you can apply the same, like, although the characteristics are different, the logic is still very similar, right? And, like, for communists, settler communists in the West, if they're not supporting the struggle of First Nations for liberation, then they're refusing to help build up those ranks necessary for them to achieve proletarian liberation in general. What I'm saying is, if you refuse to answer questions of settler colonialism and you call yourself a Marxist Leninist, you're actually doing an opportunism, self criticize. Number two, the peasantry during the bourgeois democratic revolution. This period extends from the First Russian Revolution, 1905, to the Second Revolution, February 1917. Characteristic feature of this period, the emancipation of the peasantry from the influence of the liberal bourgeoisie. Peasantry's desertion of the cadets, turn towards the proletariat, towards the Bolshevik Party. The history of this period, history of the struggle between the cadets, liberal bourgeoisie, the Bolsheviks, proletariat, or the peasantry. The outcome of this struggle was decided by the Duma period. For the period of the four Dumas served as an object lesson to the peasantry. This lesson brought home to the peasantry the fact that they would receive neither land nor liberty at the hands of the cadets, that the Tsar was wholly in favor of the landlords, and that the cadets, supporting the Tsar, that the only force they could rely on for assistance was the urban workers, proletariat. The imperialist war merely confirmed the lessons of the Duma war, and consummated the peasantry's desertion of the bourgeoisie, consummated the isolation of the liberal bourgeoisie. For the years of the war revealed the utter futility, utter deceptiveness of all hopes of obtaining peace with the Tsar and his bourgeois allies. Without the object lesson of the Duma period, the hegemony of the proletariat would have been impossible. That is how the alliance between the workers and peasants in the bourgeois democratic revolution took shape. That is how the hegemony, leadership of the proletariat, the common struggle for the overthrow of Tsarism took shape. The hegemony led to the February Revolution of 1917. The bourgeois revolutions in the West, Britain, France, Germany, Austria, took, as is well known, a different road. Their hegemony in the revolution belonged not to the proletariat, which by reason of its weakness did not and could not represent an independent political force, but to the liberal bourgeoisie. There, peasantry obtained its emancipation from the feudal regime, not at the hands of the proletariat, which was numerically weak and unorganized, but at the hands of the bourgeoisie. There, the peasantry marched against the old order side by side with the liberal bourgeoisie. There, the peasantry acted as the reserve of the bourgeoisie. There, the revolution, consequences of this, led to an enormous increase of the political weight of the bourgeoisie. In Russia, on the contrary, the bourgeois revolution produced quite opposite results. The revolution in Russia led not to the strengthening, but to the weakening of the bourgeoisie, the political force, not to an increase in its political reserve, but to the loss of its main reserve, the loss of the peasantry. The bourgeois revolution in Russia brought to the forefront not the liberal bourgeoisie, the revolutionary proletariat, rallying around the latter the millions of the peasantry. Incidentally, this explains why the bourgeois revolution in Russia passed into the proletarian revolution in a comparatively short space-time. Hegemony of the proletariat was the embryo of the transition stage to dictatorship of the proletariat. How is this peculiar phenomenon of the Russian Revolution, which has no precedent in the history of the bourgeois revolution in the West, be explained? Whence this peculiarity? It is to be explained by the fact that the bourgeois revolution unfolded in Russia under more advanced conditions of class struggle than in the West. The Russian proletariat had at that time already become an independent political force, whereas the liberal bourgeoisie, frightened by the revolutionary spirit of the proletariat, lost all semblance of revolutionary spirit, especially after the lessons of 1905, turned towards an alliance with the Tsar, the landlords, against the revolution, against the workers and peasants. To bear in mind the following circumstances determine the peculiar character of the Russian Revolution. A. The unprecedented concentration of Russian revolution. It is known, for instance, that in Russia, 54% of all workers were employed in enterprises employing over 500 workers each. Whereas so highly developed a country as the United States of America, no more than 3% of all the workers were employed in such enterprises. Scarcely needs proof that this circumstances alone, the view of the existence of a revolutionary party, the party of the Bolsheviks, transformed the working class of Russia, immense force the political life of the country. I think because the West has stronger hold in colonies around the world, the proletariat of Europe is more likely to collaborate with its liberal bourgeoisie. Didn't last as long in Russia. Yeah, exactly. The lack of, and that's the thing, like the lack of super profits and influence through which to bribe people absolutely played a role. Yeah. Again, like the lesson of 1905. Well, B. The hideous forms of exploitation in the factories, coupled with the intolerable police regime of Tsarist henchmen. Circumstance transformed every important strike of the workers into imposing political action, viewed the working class as a force that was revolutionary to the end. This right now is something that we actually kind of see taking place on universities, actually, right now. Where they're not, of course, the engines of the revolution. They're not the center of the revolution, but what it is doing, it is training them of the need for militancy and the fascistic nature of the police state of the bourgeoisie that we live under in capitalism, right? It's training them and pushing them towards what is support for independence, a proper support for independence, which is why I say, like, now is that golden opportunity for us to especially be focusing our education on settler colonialism here and pushing people towards also supporting liberation struggles, not just in Palestine, but anti-colonial liberation struggles the world over, right? And we can do that by connecting the thread of settler colonialism and European white supremacy, Palestine to here, by showing the similarities, by showing that it is based on the exact same project in a different stage, right? Revolution of First Nations people, we had what is called the elimination phase, where hundreds of millions of First Nations people were just murdered. Their scalps were, people were offered money to bring First Nation scalps to people, so on and so forth, right? So, like, this has to be a factor in our question. Whenever we're talking about revolution, whenever we're talking about progress, we have to factor in settler colonialism. Push people towards supporting the liberation. And like now, the genocide still here continues. First Nations people are not only outright murdered, they're not subject to imprisonment and so on, and forced labor and so on and so forth, but it's also the genocidal stage we're in now is called like the reconciliation phase, right? Where the idea of reconciliation is presented to the settlers as like some sort of good thing, right? They just have to integrate. They just have to assimilate more, and then it's all good. Look, like they don't have to pay taxes and all this other stuff, right? Assimilation and blood quantum is all an aspect of this stage of the genocide, which trying to complete it, but it never will complete. And our struggle for liberation will win because allies are people who want independence. And people who want true independence will always support other people's struggle for independence. And here in the West, even without the support of settler allies, I maintain personally that Native people and Black people and others who suffer under oppression by the settler colonial state of Canada and the US can build their own ranks necessary to have success in revolution. And that's leaving out the existence of allies that will come from the settler ranks, right? Because the reality is there will be allies coming from the settler ranks, will get behind the leadership of Black people and of Native people in that struggle for liberation. I think there's a whole lot more to account for in reconciliation. It will have to, if you haven't read, like, that's why one of my books here that I recommend. Let me show you. We're on an ad break right now. Wondering why I'm off topic. I gotta grab a pop too. So this right here is a really good book to read for understanding the colonial politics of recognition and reconciliation, quote unquote. And if you don't recognize this title, it's a play on Frantz Fanon work, Black Skin, White Masks. This does talk a lot about Marx, and it talks a lot about Fanon as well. I highly recommend this. We did read it on stream, but I never made it up on my YouTube. We see you, we hear you, now become white. Yeah, that's reconciliation. Exactly. Okay, let me grab something to wet my whistle, and then I'll continue. Oh, it's just in the whole episodes. Oh, okay. Interesting. Right, that's when I was uploading stuff. Okay, okay. Let me grab something to wet my whistle, and then I'll continue here. In the meantime, everybody should think about supporting the Leaping Larry stream. Bug would like it. Bug. Right, Bug?
Long live the People's Revolution!
Gonna be right back, Buggy. Okay, let us continue. Yep. Oh, and the most disgusting thing is these patsocks, these mega communists, that I was talking about that deny answering questions of settler colonialism. They literally act like that policy has already been a success, and like forget whether it was beneficial or not. That's irregardless, right? They just act like that policy is completed. that reconciliation, that's over. Boom. And they do that by saying, like, First Nations communities I've seen waving American flags and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, but also, are you missing all of the land defending actions, all of the water defending actions, all of the struggles for land back going all over the place? Don't look at the fucking Indian collective, right? Look at all the other struggles for land back going all over the fucking place. Like, forget the fact that they fucking march with a banner that says land back. Look at the actual functional land back that happens. The struggles for that. The struggles for fucking land defending, for water defending, right? Everywhere. Whether it's against pipelines or fucking golf courses. Anyway, so let us continue our read. B. The hideous forms of exploitation in the factories, coupled with the intolerable police regime of the Tsarist henchmen, circumstance which transformed every important strike of the workers into imposing political action, sealed the working class as a force that was revolutionary to the end. You know, I already read that, but I just, again, want to point out that this is happening in universities. C. The political flabbiness of the Russian bourgeoisie, which after the revolution of 1905 turned into servility to Tsarism and downright counter-revolution. Fact to be explained not only by the revolutionary spirit of the Russian proletariat, which flung the Russian bourgeoisie into the embrace of Tsarism, but also by the direct dependence of the bourgeoisie upon government contracts. The existence in the countryside, the most hideous and intolerable survivals of serfdom, coupled with the unlimited power of the landlord, circumstance which threw the peasantry into the embrace of the revolution. Nora riot. Tsarism. E. Tsarism, which stifled everything that was alive, and whose tyranny aggravated the oppression of the capitalist and the landlord, circumstance which united the struggle of workers and peasants with a single torrent of revolution. F. The imperialist war used all these contradictions in the political life of Russia to a profound revolutionary crisis, and which lent the revolution a tremendous striking force. To whom could the peasantry turn under these circumstances? From whom could it seek support against the unlimited power of the landlord, against the tyranny of the Tsar, against the devastating war which was ruining it? The liberal bourgeoisie? But it was an enemy, as the long years of the experience of all four Dumas had proved. From the socialist revolutionaries? Socialist revolutionaries were, quote unquote, better than the cadets, of course, and their program was suitable, almost a peasant program. But what could the socialist revolutionaries offer, considering that they thought of relying only on the peasants and were weak in the towns, which the enemy primarily drew? Where was the new force, would stop at nothing, either in town or country, which would boldly march in the front ranks, fight the Tsar and the landlord, would help the peasantry to extricate itself from bondage, from land hunger, from oppression, war? Was there such a force in Russia at all? Yes, there was. It was the Russian proletariat, which had shown its strength, its ability to fight to the end, its boldness, revolutionary spirit, far back 1905. At any rate, there was no other such force, or could any other be found anywhere. That is why the peasantry, when it turned its back on the cadets, attached itself to the revolutionaries, at the same time came to realize the necessity of submitting to the leadership of such a courageous leader of the revolutionary Russian proletariat. Such were the circumstances which determined the peculiar character of the Russian bourgeois revolution. 3. Peasantry during the proletarian revolution. This period extends from February Revolution of October 1917 to the October Revolution of 1917. This period is comparatively short, 8 months in all, but from the point of view of the political enlightenment and revolutionary training of the masses, these 8 months can safely be put on par with the whole decades of ordinary constitutional development, for they were 8 months of revolution. Characteristic feature of this period was the further revolutionization of the peasantry, disillusionment with the socialist revolutionaries. Does it? Yeah, I think my mic is sometimes crappy, Neuro Riot. Not sure. I think maybe I have a crappy mic, honestly. I need a new mic. Or Leaping Larry stream, and then I'll be able to afford a new mic soon. I apologize if there is any cutting out, though. I will one day be able to get, I promise. This characteristic feature of this period was the further revolutionization of the peasantry, its disillusionment with the socialist revolutionary, the disillusion with the peasantry's desertion of the socialist revolution, its new turn towards a direct rally around the proletariat, is the only consistently revolutionary force capable of leading the country to peace. History of this period is the history of the struggle between the socialist revolutionaries, petty bourgeois democracy, and the Bolsheviks, proletarian democracy, for the peasantry, win over the majority of the peasantry. The outcome of this struggle was decided by the coalition period, the Kerensky period, the refusal of the socialist revolutionaries, the Mensheviks, to confiscate the landlord's land, the fight of the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks to continue the war, June offensive at the front, introduction of capital punishment for soldiers, the Kornilov revolt. Whereas before, the preceding period, the basic question had been the overthrow of the Tsar and of the power of the landlords. Now, the period following the February Revolution, when there was no longer any Tsar, and when the interminable war had exhausted the economy of the country and utterly ruined the peasantry, the question of liquidating the war became the main problem of the revolution. The center of gravity had manifestively shifted from purely internal questions to the main question of the war. End the war. Let's get out of the war. Such was the general outcry of the war-weary nation, primarily of the peasantry. Okay, maybe lowering my volume, maybe lowering my gain here helped a little bit. I'll have to think about still getting a new mic at someday, but lowering the gain might have helped. I just have to talk louder. How many cats like belly rubs? Do you like belly rubs? Ow! I can't tell. That doesn't tell me if you like it or not, because you did that anyway. And one day we'll get that mic. Bug! Ow! Okay, I was seeing. Then. Yeah, that part kind of struck me as well, Mama. Refusal of the socialist revolutionaries and the Mensheviks to confiscate the landlord's land. Real revolutionary. Wait though, doesn't I wonder if that reminds you? Oh, sorry, Mama. I was getting to your. I know I don't want to keep you for too long. Have a good stream, Mama. Shout out to Mama. Make sure you're following Comrade Mama and everybody. If I can turn. But you know what? That does remind me of something else, Cinnamon. It reminds me of certain people who don't want to take any land away from settlers, while at the same time portraying homeless people as being the new landlords. Yeah, shit you not. That is something that this group has said. There. How about that? Is that a good view of Bug, everybody? That gives you a good little view of Bug, huh? But in order to get out of the war, it was necessary to overthrow the provisional government. It was necessary to overthrow the power of the bourgeoisie. Necessary to overthrow the power of the socialist revolutionaries, Mensheviks, for they alone were dragging out the war to a victorious finish. Practically, there was no way of getting out of the war except by overthrowing the bourgeoisie. There was a new revolution, a proletarian revolution, for it ousted from power the last group of the imperial elite, its extreme left wing, Socialist Revolutionary Party, Menshevik, in order to set up a new proletarian power, power of the Soviets, in order to put in power the party of the revolutionary proletariat, Bolshevik, party of the revolutionary struggle against the imperial war, and for democratic peace. Majority of the peasantry supported the struggle of the workers for the power of the Soviets. There was no other way out for the peasantry. Nor could there be any other way out. Thus, the Kerensky period was a great object lesson for the toiling masses of the peasantry. It showed clearly that with the socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks in power, the country could not extricate itself from the war, and the peasants could neither get land or liberty. That the Mensheviks and socialist revolution differed from the cadets only in their honey phrases and false premises, while they actually pursued the same imperialist cadet policy. That the only power that could lead the country onto the proper road, power of the Soviets. The further prolongation of the war really confirmed the truth of this lesson, spurred on the revolution, and drove millions of peasants, soldiers, rallied directly around the proletarian revolution. The isolation of the socialist revolution, Mensheviks, an incontrovertible fact. Without the objective lesson of the coalition period, dictatorship of the proletariat would have been impossible. Such were the circumstances that facilitated the process of the bourgeois revolution passing to the proletarian revolution. That is how the dictatorship of the proletariat took shape in Russia. Exactly, APC. I love these stories how they had all these people disagreeing all the time. Would have been cooler if they didn't, yeah. You know, kind of like here. Or the peasantry after the consolidation of Soviet power. Whereas before, the first period of the revolution, the main objective was the overthrow of Tsarism, and later, after the February Revolution, the primary objective was to get out of the imperial war by overthrowing the bourgeoisie. Now, after the liquidation of the Civil War, the consolidation of Soviet power, questions of economic construction forefront. Strengthen and develop the nationalized industry. For this purpose, link up industry with peasant economy, state-regulated trade, place the surplus appropriation by a tax in kind, so as, later on, by gradually lowering the tax in kind, reduce matters to the products of farming, reviving trade, develop the cooperative, drawing into them the vast masses of the peasantry. How Lenin outlined the immediate tasks of economic construction on the way of building the foundations of socialist economy. It is said that this task may prove beyond the strength of the peasant country like Russia. Some skeptics even say that it is simply utopian, impossible for the peasantry, this is small producers, therefore cannot be used in organizing the foundations of socialist production. Skeptics are mistaken. They fail to take into account certain circumstances which in the present case are of decisive significance. Let us examine the most important of these. Firstly, peasantry in the Soviet Union must not be confused with the peasantry in the West. Peasantry that has been schooled in 3 revolutions, that fought against the Tsar, power of the bourgeoisie side by side with the proletariat, and under the leadership of the proletariat. A peasantry that have received land and at the hands of the proletarian revolution, and by reason of this, become the reserve of the proletariat. Such a peasantry cannot but be different from the peasantry which, during the bourgeois revolution, fought under the leadership of the liberal bourgeoisie, received land at the hands of that bourgeoisie, and in view of this, became the reserve of the bourgeoisie. Scarcely needs proof that the Soviet peasantry, which has learned to appreciate its political friendship, political collaboration, proletariat, and which owes its freedom to the friendship and collaboration, cannot but represent exceptionally favorable the economic collaboration with the proletariat. And this lesson, by the way, ironically enough, all this chapter is the lesson, a major lesson anyway, one major lesson that the mega communists, the opportunists are failing to grasp. They might read this and they might hear what it's saying, but they're not understanding how do you call it? They're not understanding the impact, right? They're not understanding like the implication of what this is saying in regards to the West. Which is again why I find it so funny when like Noah portrays US as having these 3 revolutions. Like, no. It hasn't. Hasn't, right? It's had great periods of struggle, no doubt. But the sort of revolutionary struggle that informs proletarians and peasants about the need to unite against the bourgeoisie, so much, right? As we know. They'd just be like, there's no peasants in the US and just skip it. Exactly, Frankster. And they do the same thing with the proletariat. They take an unscientific view of the proletariat in general. Rather than understanding the proletariat is something decided by ideology and is the most independent class that is fighting for the working class ideology, they just see it as something that is just having to do with your demographic, where you work, right? Then they base their question on the main force of the revolution on that class origin alone, without taking into account people's class consciousness, which just leads them to all kinds of hilariously mistaken analyses. Engels said that the conquest of political power, I'm going to quote Engels here a little bit at length. Engels said that, quote, the conquest of political power by the Socialist Party has become a matter of the not too distant future. That order to conquer political power, this party must first go to the towns, the country, must become a power in the countryside. Unquote. Engels, Peasant Question, 1922. He wrote this in the 90s of the last century, having in mind the Western peasantry. Does it need proof that the Russian communists, after accomplishing this amount of work in the course of the three revolutions, have already succeeded in gaining in the countryside an influence and backing, like of which our Western comrades dare not even. How can it be denied that this circumstance must decidedly facilitate the organization of economic collaboration between the working class and peasantry of Russia? Posted both USA media, social media guidelines telling clubs not to post pics from controversial figures like Mao and Stalin. Yeah, I just say Rick Rick with all the greatest intentions of the world, I know, did go did sort of was kind of thinking that, hey, I'm working with Matthew Hunter, who, you know, Matthew Hunter's great and all, but was like, hey, I'm working with Matthew Hunter and we're going to get this program changed, right? Stuff like this. And then I was kind of kept trying to warn Rick. I was like, I don't know. I would be very, very skeptical. Like, till I actually see them implementing this change, I'm just gonna say, like, I would just not be too excited about any prospect of that happening. And unfortunately, they wouldn't even allow him to join the fucking party. So, just to prove exactly what I was trying to do correctly. National keeps themselves isolated. It's like PSL, right? PSL and Communist Party USA, and I don't know the solution to it. I'm just pointing out the fact that both of these parties have the problem of a leadership that becomes unaccountable and immune to essentially democratic centralism. I mean, I mean, yeah, I think we need a land back party NTC. I think what I would like to see is something sort of like a settler parties that are created in order to explicitly support decolonial struggles for liberation. Like, that is the express purpose of the party. You know what I mean? Like, educating its members on settler colonialism, educating its members on indigenous issues, on treaties and stuff like this, and essentially making a party that essentially exists solely to support First Nations struggles and First Nations parties and so on and so forth, without being a political party setting forward its own programs and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Instead of putting forward its own programs, it would be relaying the leadership of First Nations. Yeah. Settler Solidarity Party for Indigenous Liberation, something like that. Exactly, GMO. Something that exists to be material, something that materially combats settler colonialism as much as possible, while also providing settlers education at the same time. Like, it could aim to both play a role in reparations and in helping feeding poor settlers as well. You know, which then could help them see this common see this common interest that we have. Yeah, I mean, that's part of all my work that I've ever done has been, I've never thought of myself as much of a leader or anything like that, but I've always hoped that somehow my work will inspire people to build something like that. And whether that's my work in real life here locally or my work online, I do hope that, um, and that's why I'm the person who reads Juche. I read Juche in decolonial theory and explain it to you that way. I know not everybody is like searching out this information themselves, so I'll read it to you, and then other people can go forth and relay that information to others, and the more we spread that around, I think the more that we can have the What is land back? Land back is simply native liberation. It's it's uh it's the ending of native genocide, the ending of continuing native land theft, people, the recognition of native sovereignty. That's what land back is. It doesn't mean all settlers get on a boat and go home. Right, let's continue. If that doesn't answer your question though, let me know. Okay, so to continue, the skeptics maintain that all peasants are a factor that is incompatible with socialist construction. But listen to what Engels says about the small peasants of the West. We are decidedly on the side of the small peasant. We shall do everything at all permissible to make his lot more bearable, facilitate his transition to cooperative, should he decide to do so, and even to make it possible for him to remain on his small holding for a protracted length of time. Think the matter over. Should he, should he still be unable to bring himself to this decision? We do this not only because we consider a small peasant, who does his own work as virtually belonging to us, but also in the direct interest of the party. Greater the number of peasants can save from being actually hurled down into the proletariat, whom we can win to our side while they are still peasants, more quickly and easily social transformation will be accomplished. It will serve us not wait with this transformation, with capitalist production, is developed everywhere to its utmost consequence, until the last small handicraftsman, last small peasant have fallen victim to capitalist large-scale production. The material sacrifices to be made for this purpose, interests of the peasants, and to be defrayed out public funds can, from the point of view of capitalist economy, viewed only as money thrown away, but it is nevertheless an excellent investment, because it will effect a perhaps tenfold saving the cost of the social reorganization in general. In this sense, can therefore afford to deal very liberally with the peasants. That is again from Engels on the peasant question. I just reading this and seeing Ibid just reminds me of remember when we were watching that documentary that thing that on Lenin's stream that time, and it was like a documentary that somebody did, and they were like reading a bunch of Stalin and Lenin, but every time they got to when they were reading like a quote like this, they would get to the end, and instead of telling you who the quote was, they would just go Ibid. Like that works when you're reading, because I know that I've just read Engels up here. I know I just read Engels, the peasant question right here, right? And Ibid means that this quote is simply a continuation, or it's from the same source as this quote above it, right? Ibid is my favorite writer, yeah. Funny I see that. Well, we're hearing a lot of quotes from this Ibid. We should just read their book instead. Yeah, that was so funny when we were watching that. They kept saying Ibid, and it was like after several quotes of them saying Ibid, you're just like, I don't remember who this was anymore. Which is why when you're reading the work out loud, like if you do happen to start e-reading or anything out there, just who knows who might be watching, right? Instead of reading out Ibid when you're doing an e-reading, when you get to Ibid, you should instead just say again what the previous quote was, which is why when I got to the end, I just said, this is again Engels from The Peasant Question, 1918. Yeah, just say where it's from. 1922 or whatever. 1922 edition. So a more recent translation of it is what it's from. So I'm sure you can still find the exact same meat. You can come here to do math, just tell us the number. Cheeseburger picnic. Larry going for a feed later. Cheeseburger picnic lawsuit. You know, cheeseburger picnic. Bam. Peanut butter and jam. You know? You're getting two birds stoned at once? Hello? Look, am I disturbing you? I turned you that way so that people can self. That is what Ingalls said, having in mind the Western peasantry. But is it not clear that what Ingalls said can nowhere be realized so easily and so completely as in the land of the dictatorship of the proletariat? Is it not clear that only in Soviet Russia is it possible at once and to the fullest extent for small peasant who does his own work come over to our side, for the material sacrifices necessary for this to be made, and for necessary liberality towards the peasants to be played? Not clear that these similar measures for the benefit of the peasantry are already being carried out in Russia. How can it be denied that this circumstance, in its turn, facilitate and advance the work of economic construction in the land of the Soviets? And now, and again, so I'm going to again look at another point against this, against those who say that the peasants cannot be used to build socialism. So, secondly, agriculture in Russia must not be confused with agriculture in the West. There, agriculture is developed along the ordinary lines of capitalism, under conditions of profound differentiation among the peasantry, with large land estates, private capitalist latifundia at one extreme, and pauperism, destitution, wage slavery at the other. The peasants, the peasants, yes, owing to this disintegration and decay are quite natural. Not so in Russia. Here, agriculture cannot develop along such a path, if for no other reason than that the existence of Soviet power, the nationalization of the principal instrument of production, precludes such a development. In Russia, the development of agriculture must proceed along a different path, along the path of organizing millions of small middle peasants in cooperative, along the path of developing in the countryside a mass cooperative movement supported by the state by means of preferential credits. Lenin rightly pointed out in his articles on cooperation that the development of agriculture in our country must proceed along a new path, along the path of drawing the majority of the peasants to socialist construction through the cooperative, along the path of gradually introducing agriculture principles of collectivism, first in the sphere of marketing and later in the production of agricultural products. Of extreme interest in this respect are several new phenomena observed in the countryside in connection with the work of agricultural cooperatives. It is well known that new large-scale organizations sprung up within Celescuas. Celescosuas? Wow, that's a name I'm having trouble pronouncing. You get it. In different branches of agriculture, such as production of flax, potatoes, butter, etc., which have great future before them. Of these, Flax Center, for instance, unites a whole network of peasant flax growers associations. The Flax Center supplies the peasants with implements. Then it buys all the flax produced by the peasants, disposes of it on the market on a large scale, guarantees the peasants a share in the profits, and this way links peasant economy with state industry through this Lesquios. What shall we call this form of organization of production? In my opinion, it is domestic system of large-scale state social production in agriculture. Oh, don't remind me, GMO. And speaking of the domestic system of state social production, I do so by analogy with the domestic system under capitalism. Let us say in the textile industry, where the handicraftsmen received their raw material and tools from the capitalist and turned over to him the entire product of their labor, thus being in fact semi-wage earners, working in their own homes. This is one of numerous indices showing the path along which our agriculture must develop. There is no need to mention here similar indices in other branches of agriculture. It's scarcely proof that the vast majority of the peasantry will eagerly take this new path of development, rejecting the path of private capitalist latifundia and wage slavery, path of destitution, ruin. Here is what Lenin says about the path of development of our agriculture. Quote, state power over all large-scale meat production, state power in the hands of the proletariat, the alliance of this proletariat with the many small, very small peasants, the assured leadership of the peasantry by the proletariat, etc. Is not all this all that is necessary for building a complete society? The cooperatives and the cooperatives alone, which we formerly looked upon as huckstrung, and which, from a certain aspect, we have the right to look down upon as such now under the NEP? This not all that is necessary for building a complete socialist society. This is not yet the building of socialist society, but it is all that is necessary and sufficient for this building. Lenin. Yeah, Frankster, that sounds like a viable solution. Further, on speaking of the necessity of giving financial and other assistance to the cooperative as a, quote, new principle of organizing the population and a new social system under the dictatorship of the proletariat, Lenin continued. Every social system arises only with the financial assistance of a definite class. No need to mention that hundreds of millions of rubles that the birth of free capitalism cost. Now we must realize and apply in our practical work the fact that the social system we must now give more than usual assistance is the cooperative system. But it must be assisted in the real sense of it, i.e., it will not be enough to assistance mean assistance for any kind of cooperative trade. By assistance, we mean assistance for cooperative trade in which really large masses of the population really take part. Ibid. Lenin. What do all these facts prove? That the skeptics are wrong. That Leninism is right in regarding the masses of laboring peasants as the reserve of the proletariat. That the proletariat in power can and must use this reserve in order to link in with agriculture, to advance socialist construction, and provide for the dictatorship of the proletariat that necessary foundation without which the transition to economy is impossible. And this Soloskius is the all-Russian union of rural cooperatives that existed from 1921 to 1928. There you have it, everybody. Chapter 5. Foundations of Leninism complete. Time we read, we're going to be on we're going to be on a great one next, which is the national question. This one I'm going to have some things to talk about when we read this one. Let's just say that. Have some things to talk about when we do this one. I'll just say about that. And with that, we did our homework for today, everybody. We did our politics. Congratulations. Liberation talk is my thing. If you are enjoying the Leaping Larry stream, you should think about subscribing, supporting this. Look, I'll do the cutest thing as you're subscribing, okay? Come on. That makes you want to subscribe to the Larry stream. Oh, look at this. Subscribe to the Leaping Larry stream for more content like this. And the best tiny little pictures on the internet. Best way you can support the Leaping Larry through direct donations. But of course, subscriptions, gift subs, also very, very appreciated way of supporting the stream and quite literally keeps us going as well. And look, Bub is giving you a special blep. Just because you're considering supporting the stream. A bug blep for you all. A bug blep. This is how she sleeps.
I would have been friends with Stalin.
True. I would have been friends with Stalin. Right? Well, we did politics. Anyone got any questions, comments?